Hi, this is part 4 of the rebuilding of the 1930s NuTone time chime. So far we've gotten the clock and the cover all serviced and reassembled and working. Thumbs up on that. Now we have to tackle the base. By comparison, the base is actually fairly simple. It's just a pretty straightforward 2-note, 2-door chime base. So we have 2 solenoids here. The top solenoid is for the front door, or the primary door, and that's the one that will give you ding and dong when we get it fixed. And the lower solenoid is for the rear door, which is just a single note. It slides to the side. I think it'll slide, maybe it won't. It's kind of rusty. Yeah, see, it's all hung up. So that's not good. It's 2 simple solenoids, 3 little screw terminal connections here. You've got plungers, springs, and tips like almost all door chimes have. And then you have the 2 decorative in quotes at the moment because they're not very decorative, resonator tubes and the 2 tone bars. So what we're going to do in this part is we're going to disassemble all of this because we need to clean everything and service it so we can put it back together and make it work again. First thing we have to do, the thing that's a little tricky about this, if you haven't done one of these before, is taking it apart because it's not as obvious as it may seem when you first look at it. One of the things that definitely needs to be done are the plungers need to come out of the solenoids because the surface of the plungers, it's all rusted. They need to be cleaned so they slide freely, and the tubes inside the solenoid, the coils, they need to be cleaned also because all of this has to move very freely. If it doesn't, it won't sound right. If you look at this, you may think, well, how do you get this apart? Because it doesn't look easy, and it is if you understand what to do. The little brackets here and here and here and here, which have these little formed ends on them for the tubes of the coils, these are not screwed onto the base from the back. They're actually like spot welded or something in place. So how do you get it all apart? Because you have to get these out, the plungers out, but you can't get them out all the way because the tubes and the resonators are in the way. And what do? Well, you take the tubes and the resonators, or the resonators and the tone bars off. That's what you do, because once you do that, then you can get to the rest of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip this over, and there are 4 nuts, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we use our 5/16 inch nut driver, we can take the nuts off. And what we're going to do with the nuts? Well, we're going to do what we always do, which is, oh, and there's a little washer also. Cup, they go in the cup. Because what happens if you don't put them in the cup? You'll lose them. And then you'll go to put it back together and you won't be able to find them because they'll be on the floor somewhere. And then you'll probably cry. And then you'll call me and want to know, do you have any of those nuts and washers from a 1930s NuTone chime? And then I'll say no. And I'll try really hard not to snicker when I say that because, you know, how many parts for 1930 NuTone chimes are left in the world? Not very many. So if we take those off, we can now lift the tone bars out. Now you have to remember, this one with the short one goes on the right, and this one with the long one goes on the left. So if we lift these out, put those aside for a minute, see, now it becomes way easier because they're out of the way, and we can take this plunger assembly and we can slide it out. This one you can't slide out because there's this stop right here, and this stop, when it was new, it has sort of a rubbery cushion thing on it right here, which will get replaced because it's all falling apart, especially now that I'm poking at it with a screwdriver. So the way you take this one out, this one has to come out of this side going to the right. So what you have to do is you have to take the spring loose. Now the way this is made, the spring, the diameter of the spring is larger here at the end than it is here at this end, and in the end of the plunger there's a groove, and the smallest coils are fit into the groove of the plunger, and that's what holds it in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully remove the coil of the spring from the groove in the plunger. Now if you mess this up, it's going to make it really hard to make it stay later on. And this is really kind of hard to show you, but I'll make an attempt because, you know, I'm just that kind of guy. Now, what you want to do is, I'm using my magnifier so I can actually see what I'm doing. And I will try to keep my big hands out of the way as much as I can. that should work pretty well. So looking at it very carefully and using a fairly small flat-bladed screwdriver, what you do is you find a coil, or the first coil, that's not quite in the groove, which would be this one right here. And again, I know this is hard to see, so I can only sort of explain it as I go. And what you do is you want to push the coil out of the groove a little bit, and then you might have to turn the plunger to see the other side. And you're looking for the end of the spring. And of course this one's kind of rusty and dirty, and that makes it even that much more challenging. But what you have to do is you carefully have to work the coil of the spring loose and then push it out of the groove. Sometimes it's easier if you have two screwdrivers, because right now this one's holding the end and I pushed it to the right a little bit, which made it spring out. Spring is a technical term that's used when discussing springs quite extensively in the industry. And once it's out, like it is right here, see right here where it's out, then you sort of wind it like this a little bit, and eventually you'll wind it enough where you're beyond the smallest coils and it pops loose. How about that? If you do this heavy-handedly and you bend and deform the smallest coils on the end, it won't want to stay in the groove. If you make it really bad, then it's really hard to fix. If it only happens a little bit at the end, I'll show you how you deal with that. So where does this go? Now this spring, 1930 NuTone spring. Where does this go? This goes in the cup. Why? Because if you lose it, you're out of luck. Once we've done that, now we can take the plunger and try to push it through. It's all very rusty. And see, it doesn't really want to come out very well. See how rusty it is? See how it's kind of shiny here and not shiny at all there? That's what happens. So now this much is pretty much done. These solenoid coils, I did a quick resistance measurement on them. They're fine. The only thing we really need to do at the base is we'll just clean it lightly with a little soap and water to take some of the grime off of it. If we look at it carefully, there's a grommet here to keep the wires from shorting out. We'll replace that with a new grommet. Here we have, oh, you can't see all that. Here we have an original early NuTone decal. Here we have a patent pending sticker. It says NuTone Chimes Incorporated, Cincinnati, Ohio. No date. It says 12/29, so I don't think it's that early, and that's just probably a sticker number. Now, let's review one thing really carefully that I tell people all the time. See this original label right here from NuTone Chimes Incorporated in Cincinnati, Ohio? What does it say right here at the top in really big letters with an exclamation mark? Do not oil. Don't put oil on the plungers. Don't put oil on the solenoids. You don't need to do that. That's not the way you fix it. All it does is gum it up and make it work. Worse, it was a problem in 1939, and it's a problem today. So put the oil away. That includes WD-40 and all that other kind of junk, which is wrong. What do you clean this with? Ronson lighter fluid, the kind that your grandpa put in a Zippo lighter during World War II when he was fighting on Iwo Jima so we could all have freedom. So follow along. Don't use oil, don't use WD-40, just a little lighter fluid will do wonders. Here are our two plunger assemblies. This is the top one, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the spring off this one, and surprisingly enough, it works exactly the same way. We need to work the spring out of the groove so we can take it off, and we're going to do that, surprisingly enough, exactly the same way. We're very carefully going to work it out. It's a little bit easier to do on this one because I can hold it in my fingers and peer at it carefully, and it won't be nearly as hard. So here's the second spring. Again, where does the spring go? The spring goes in the cup. Because again, if you lose it, you're out of luck. Now, these plunger assemblies are special plunger assemblies because they're really early ones. They're some type of steel rod with a groove in the end for the spring. But what makes them really special is the tips here and here and this one down there, these are made out of wood. These are not plastic. The early NuTone chimes, the tips were made out of wood. What kind of wood is it? I have no idea. It's not a real hardwood. For some reason, I always imagine that it's beechwood, but I don't know that. That's just something I think. You have to be super, super, super careful with these because these are not very large. It's not a hardwood like oak or something like that, and they're fairly easy to break. So when we clean these, which we're not going to do right now, you have to clean them by hand very carefully, and be careful not to break the tips off because making wooden tips is really difficult. What does that leave? That leaves our two brass resonating tubes with our tone bars attached. Okay, now listen carefully. Listen to this. Hear how it sort of rings and it resonates after? Now, listen to this one. Hold it the same way. Hear how that one goes like thunk, thunk, thunk? That's because the grommets that hold it to the threaded rods in the resonator are all worn out, and this is held much too tightly, not the way it should be. That one's pretty stiff. This one, see, it moves around a lot more. It wiggles. This is a very fine point on this kind of stuff. You want the tone bars need to be isolated from the screws that hold them in place, but not held so tightly that it goes thunk, thunk, thunk when it's rung, instead of having that nice ringing tone like you would expect. And it's a very, very fine line. If you were to put the tone bars on the screws without any grommets, then it would have what NuTone used to refer to as that jangly sound, which you don't want at all. Jangly's bad, just ask anybody. So what we're going to do is, right now, we're going to take these acorn nuts off. And you want to be careful with these because the acorn nuts are brass. At least I think they're brass. Let's see if they're magnetic. I don't think they are. Here we have our super high power magnet. Nope, not magnetic. So they're brass. Where do the brass acorn nuts go? Oh, in the cup. And then we'll take this tone bar off. And then we'll do the same thing with this one. Cup, cup, tone bar off. All right. So now the tone bars, all we're going to do with these are some type of steel. It's my understanding is they are made out of a special alloy, which means a different mixture of different kinds of metals, and they were made specifically for NuTone by a foundry in Cincinnati, Ohio, who had a secret formula to make NuTone chimes sound like what they sound like. These have a sort of a brass, some kind of wash or covering over them to make them gold. They're not solid brass, and if you rub on this, it will wear off and it will show the steel underneath. All we're going to do with these at the end is we're going to take a wet rag and we're going to wipe them down so they're not grimy, and that's all we're going to do. The grommets on these are in really bad shape. They're very hard and brittle and falling apart, and we'll get into grommets and the world of grommets in another part. So we'll just put the tone bars aside for now. And then we have our resonator tubes. So the resonator tubes have the screws. These are the two on the back that hold it to the base, and these are the two here that the tone bars fit around. And then of course these need to be polished. These are very tarnished, as you can see, and they have a little bit of paint on them. Not that bad. This one's very tarnished. This one's way worse. So these need to be completely and totally cleaned and polished. And I'm going to try something different with one of these to see if it makes it go a little bit faster. As you saw in part 3, when we reassembled the clock mechanism, the brass gears from the clock, which were cleaned in the ultrasonic cleaner, they turned out really clean and shiny and looked almost like brand new. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to immerse it in the ultrasonic cleaner, put a rag over it to keep the vapors down, and I'm going to let it run for a half an hour and see if the clock cleaning solution helps remove some of the tarnish, so yours truly doesn't have to spend as much time with the brasso and rags polishing up the tubes. I'm going to do that now. For the most part, that's the end of part 4. Part 4 is going to be short. 1 through 3 were kind of long, so it's kind of short. So mostly part 4 is all about cleaning things. When it comes time to clean the plunger assemblies. That'll probably be part 5, and then we'll put it all back together. That's all for part 4. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.